What language is that? Good evening, and I warmly welcome you to this edition of Behind the Headlines, this Wednesday, 31st of May 2023, the last day of the month, and tomorrow is 1st of June, of course, but my name is Charles Odongtho, your moderator. This evening we are back again with yet another topic, an important topic for the region, for this country, if you like, for global political and security dynamics. And we are talking Somalia, we are talking the Somali question, and we are asking ourselves, Uganda has been in Somalia since 2007, I think. It was 2007, I think. Yes, I thought it was April. It was March, right?
March.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding us. I was in Jinja on that day when our troops were taking off, and I
was in Garamba facing Konyandoti on that day.
I still recall General Sejusa was there, the late Eli Tumwine was there, late good brother, late Mayombo was there, and to see off our troops. Almost 15 years later, we are still there, and we are asking the question, is it feasible for a country to resolve a civil dispute through foreign solution? We will be expanding the debate beyond just Somalia, but we will also be looking at some of the current issues. We deeply, I really say deeply, sympathize with the last week's occurrence against our troops. We lost some people. We are not yet sure or clear on how many of our brothers or sisters we have lost in that terrible attack. The general who speaks for the UPDF is here. He will be telling us what is already known, but our hearts go out to all the families that are affected. Of course, we are talking about the UPDF family as well. We will be discussing all these issues, and I'm excited that we have a great panel of knowledgeable men and women on this show to discuss all this. We have, let me start with the person who is probably, okay, there are two new members on this show today. Let me start with Honorable Ambassador Simon Mulongo. He's a security analyst. Simon Mulongo has been an MP, and right now he discusses and comments on security matters. He has worked in Somalia, representing Uganda for over 5 years. Honorable Simon, it's great to see you. You haven't aged at all. What do you eat? Malewa?
I think eating malewa and showering river Wakaka water.
Okay.
You remain young and strong. Yes.
But good to see you and good to have you back.
Thank you so much.
I welcome you to the show.
People think I'm only 90. So the guy has my genes, me as his grandfather. Simon, why do you hide the facts?
Next to Honorable Simon Mulongo, let me introduce Timothy Nyangweso, a communication specialist, and is here with us. It's his maiden appearance on this show as well. Timothy, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charles. It's good to be here with Andrew claiming to be my grandfather.
He claims
claiming?
He's also telling me I need to give him cows for my beard, so that will be resolved later.
You will resolve that.
Grandchildren are not allowed to wear a beard unless they have given cows to grandpa.
He feels envious of some beards. He's a very sporadic. He needs to pay half.
Now, this is double tragedy. The beards are sporadic, the hair is disappearing very fast.
That's why I'm saying he needs to pay half to the salon guys when they shave his hair. Yes. But good to have you, Nyangweso. Then, of course, the guys who have been here, starting with the extreme, let me start with the extreme left. Honorable Brigadier General Felix Kulaije, he is UPDF spokesman or spokesperson. Honorable, you're most welcome back to the show.
You're about to make the PS not pay me.
Why?
My title is defense spokesperson.
Defense spokesperson.
Yeah, now for you are going with the old title. Ever since a lady came in, the title changed to spokesperson, first of all.
Did it go upwards or it remained payment? If there is a change of title, going upwards means payment is also...
Charles.
Yes.
I never want to talk about money matters. They are very controversial.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Honorable Felix. The old man of the clan, Andrew Mujuni Mwenda, CEO Independent Magazine. He also speaks for the MK Army. Recently, they have been on his case for other things. But old man of the clan, Andrew Mwenda, you're most welcome back to the show.
My pleasure to be here.
Good to see you. Finally,
you left out the title of the Colonel General.
Good. You see?
Yes, it's a Colonel
too
General.
many titles. But we will resolve that as well.
You know that is a Eastern Europe title.
But we
Actually,
had
the
them
Germans
here
do
some time ago.
Sorry?
The Germans during the Second World War.
The Second World, that's right.
Had that rank.
But why do you go far when home here we had them?
When? Here in Uganda,
Where?
no. We've never had the Colonel General.
Oh, no, I mean titles. I mean the long list of titles.
Yes, that one is true.
General Min had a long list.
But Colonel General was actually a substantive rank in Germany, in the Soviet Union. Actually, even today, they still have those.
The Russians still have
The Russians still have them.
Okay. Finally, we have Professor Sally Sarah. She's the Dean of School of Gender and Women's Studies, a commentator. Professor, you're most welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening, viewers.
Good. Let me start with, Honorable Simon Mlongo. We are discussing something that is close to your heart. Let me start from the question that I listen to a lot in Parliament, in our Parliament. Do you think it is important for us to still be in Somalia, in your view?
Thank you so much. The justification for us to be in Somalia is confirmed and rubber-stamped and reaffirmed by a number of things. One, that we need to have regional peace and stability. And this was discussed by the region, initially by IGAD, and then finally by the African Union Commission. Secondly, this matter was authorized by the UN in very clear terms. And as such, Uganda's involvement in Somalia is legitimate and highly justifying. The issue of the security of Somalia is not just for the Somalis alone. It is also for the security of the region. Because the nature of the insurgent terrorists in Somalia is a declaration of war on Western civilization. And in the declaration, they're very clear. They wanted to Islamize Eastern Africa and then proceed to Europe and go up to Alaska. In their own words, they use the word Alaska. And then they'll go eastwards to Solomon Islands, meaning that they are not just intending to stop in Somalia. They want to start with the 5 regions that constitute Somalia pre-independence. And that includes regions like Ogaden, Djibouti, Eastern Kenya, and all these. And then they will expand outwards. In other words, their coming on the stage was nothing but a threat to the region. And of course, like anything else, if a threat emanates from a neighborhood, a huge tree with lots of snakes breeding, and you think that because the tree is in the neighborhood and you're in a safe haven, that is only a matter of time. And indeed, they have done so. They have done some long-term operations not just in Kampala, but also in other East African countries. The recruitment base of these people is not just Somalis. We have Ugandans, we have Comorians, we have Tanzanians, we have Kenyans, we have Ethiopians, we have Djiboutians, and we have people from the Middle East, including those who are from the diaspora. So this threat there is not just and cannot be limited to Somalia alone. So for that matter, the decision by the regional heads of state and government, supported by the international community, justify the fact that the Al-Shabaab, by then starting with Islamic Union courts, were a threat to peace and security. And that falls particularly in the purview of the United Nations Charter, which stipulates that if there is threat to peace and security, the UN Security Council has to swing into action.
Good. Honorable Kulaije, we decided to place boots, Ugandan troops in Somalia. And of course we have lost lives. Combat is not tea parties. That's agreed. But how much should we lose as Uganda fighting far away in Somalia? Is it possible that we can make our borders safe from within Uganda without taking our sons and daughters into Somalia?
Interestingly, you're asking that question after his explanation, which I thought answers the question when you asked it. But let's come to your house. Would you fight a thief from the bedroom or outside? What's better?
I lock the door. I wait for, if the thief attempts to break my door, that's when I take action.
The bedroom door?
Huh? No, not from the bedroom door, the sitting room.
The gate.
By the time you hear the thief at the door, he's actually inside. I don't know the wisdom of we the younger ones these days, but my father, when the dog would bark, he would pick his spear and get out.
And patrols the
exactly.
The compound.
That's the logic of defense. The most effective defense is offense. And so he has explained the question of regional security. But the most important thing we need to realize, why has Africa been referred to as a dark continent? One of the reasons is constant instability. Failing states or failed states. That's the description of the African countries. And yet we lament about these conditions, but we don't want to take action. Typical of lazy minds. You say something is wrong, but you do not want to be the first to remove it or to correct it. The best thing for Africa to do, in the famous notion of African solutions to African problems, was for Africans to take the initiative, as they did this time round. And when they took the initiative, you see, Simon has talked about IGAD. The Somali problem, there were attempts by the UN, 2003. We prepared a force to go under the command of then Lieutenant Colonel Katumba Wamala, now General. When the UN deployed, the Americans on landing changed the mission. It was Restore Hope, which was delivery of food, humanitarian aid. On the ground, they changed the mission objective to capture Faraidid. A Hawiye, in a Hawiye dominated the city. And you know, for them, it is clans that do fight.
Yeah.
The rest is the history of what happened to them. I have skipped one thing that Ugandans didn't know. In 1992, President Museveni flew to Mogadishu. From the airport to the State House, I think we paid about 3-4 groups in taxes.
Ransom.
Of course. And his intention was to mediate these two guys who were fighting. Hawiye, and the other one was called Muhammad who?
Faraday.
Huh?
Faraday.
No, Faraday was the general. He was fighting with somebody else who had been initiated by his government, called Muhammad somebody. They couldn't agree. He came back, then UN deployed.
I think it was called Al-Mahad Mohammed.
Mahdi is Sudani.
Al-Mahad Mohammed was the main contestant with Mohammed Farah.
Farah.
Yeah.
Thank you. UN deploys, it fails. Egypt attempts to mediate. It fails. Ethiopia tried in
2006.
No. That's a later one. There was an earlier one in 1996 or 7 there, after the war, the internal war in Ethiopia. Later Zenawi tried. It failed. Again, Egypt tried in 98, it didn't go through. So there have been attempts at even IGAD. You remember there was IGASOM, Simon. There was IGASOM. Force earmarked to go in, they couldn't. Now, the Islamic Courts Union sweeps through. What did it exploit? They exploited the IGAD talks, if I remember very well, ladies and gentlemen, that were taking place in Nairobi, swept through and captured Mogadishu. Now, because Ethiopia knew what was coming on her border, they deployed inside. And indeed, they engaged these guys. Actually, we were able to land because they gave us a bridgehead. Yes, these guys were firing at our aircrafts, but at least we got something at the airport where the aircrafts could land. But this was not only the organizations as mentioned. On the precinct, having gotten the green light of United Nations, the African Union's heads of summit was taking place in Abuja. So in the precincts of this summit, that's when they decided on the countries to deploy. Now, I want to answer the question, why Uganda always? They asked Uganda, they asked Tanzania, they asked Malawi, they asked Nigeria. Uganda agreed, and Burundi. Burundi agreed, Malawi agreed, but never came. Tanzania said no. Nigeria said no, and the reasons, for reasons of diplomacy, I will not mention them. But eventually they deployed the police and administrators that he was working with in the force headquarters. So Uganda was responding to the request of the African Union to deploy on the ground. And as soon as the head of state landed back, he told us to prepare. And that's how, on the 9th of March, we landed in Mogadishu amidst fire. The aircraft that was number 2, bringing equipment, was banned. Fortunately, we didn't lose personnel. And here we are. And over the time, once the UN dollar came in, others came on the show. Then, of course, you know, eventually, I think that I will leave it to the political minds. The rules of UN were changed, the principles. Normally in UN peacekeeping, neighbors don't deploy in the conflict country. But that was changed. Only influence of one individual. For reasons of my uniform, I will not mention him. But he was the head of state then of some powerful country. And the region deployed. Not only that, principle number 2, the troop corps to be country with the largest troops provides the force commander. This was also changed. That should be rotational. These are other ramifications that we need to examine. So Uganda becomes a pioneer because of our principle of Pan-Africanism. But 2, we were requested by the African Union. 3, African solution to African problems.
Okay. Andrew, you have followed Somalia. Of course, you follow a lot of security happenings in the region, around the world, in your country. At what point would you say I've helped a neighbor enough let the neighbor sort out their problem. In any case, some commentators have actually, especially in the aftermath of what happened last Friday, some people have started comparing Somalia to even Afghanistan. The Taliban, the Americans had to leave them, was it last year or the other year, and say, sort out your problem. And now they have their own issues, but they are moving on independently. Do you think that there has to come that time when you bite the bullet and say, this is the decision we are going to take?
Well, if you asked me from a security point of view, if you're going to deploy in a country, General Koleji here would know, there are certain questions I believe any government should ask, strategic questions. What is the main aim of us going into Somalia? What is the purpose of this mission? Once you have defined the aim, then you must ask is what are the key success indicators that you are looking at? How are you going to measure success in realization of that aim? The third thing you do, once you have established key success indicators, then you would say, what is your exit strategy? If you don't answer those three things, you are likely to deploy blindly in a country and enter what we call mission creep. You enter there, new factors and combinations come, and you get entangled in a maze of so many other things. You get dragged into things you should not be involved in. So if you ask me, I do not know what Uganda's main aim is. Simon here has said, well, the Islamists in Somalia are planning to take over the whole world. So Uganda is at the front line of stopping them from taking over Alaska. I tell you, I find that too broad a mission for you to define for yourself. In any case, if America is under threat, they're going to take over Alaska and the Solomon Islands. Why isn't America deploying there? Its security and independence are at stake. But I think that Simon has bought into American propaganda. America has effective control of all the instruments of mass propaganda. So they can declare you a devil, and then they will use their control of the instruments of mass propaganda, CNN, BBC, all the media they control, to declare you a devil like they have done for Putin, or they will do for Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, in order to achieve their own aims. I don't agree with this categorization of militant Islamists as people seeking to dominate the world, and therefore all of us should be up in arms against them. If you go to the United States itself, historically America has had militant Christians, or militant Christianity, which use, actually let me put it this way, they have white supremacists who use militant Christianity to promote their agenda politically inside America, including bombing black churches, lynching black people, doing all sorts of dirty things. The state in America has never ostracized them from the political process. The Christian right is continually engaged in the American political process. They have never declared them terrorists and therefore ostracized them from the political process. And one of the reasons why that country is stable is because of that. But when they go to Muslim societies, they try to say that these militant Islamists must be excluded from politics and must be fought to the bitter end. And I think that's where the problem comes from. My own experience with occupations is that, one, the biggest cause of terrorism, there was a study done by the London School of Economics across the last 70 years, has been occupation. Should you have foreign forces in a country, you are likely to stimulate and simulate terrorism as a response. So you look at the terrorism in the Middle East, Israeli occupation of Palestine lands. You look at Iraq, when America was occupying it, the consequence was terrorism. You look at Afghanistan, so terrorism is a response to foreign occupation, and Uganda should not be surprised by that. The other point is that I personally believe that the problems of Somalia are of a political nature, primarily. They may have taken on a military element, but they are primarily political. And I don't think any amount of foreign intervention can solve the problems of Somalia. Only Somalis can solve the problems of their country. Either the Somalis have to fight until one side secures a decisive military victory and therefore is able to impose its will on that society, the way the NRA secured a decisive military victory in Uganda and imposed its own version of order, or the RPF in Rwanda, or the TPLF in Ethiopia. You can look at all these revolutionary movements until wars tend to end after a culminating phase of violence, and when one side secures a decisive military victory. The other is wars will end when all the sides to the battle are exhausted by fighting and find mutual accommodation more profitable than further combat. So unless the guys in Somalia, one secures a decisive military victory, which is what I think the Islamic Coast Union had done, and I'll tell you my role in the Islamic Coast Union, or Al-Shabaab, I think, can secure a decisive military victory. Once they control the levers of power, then you can impose discipline on them. The Americans rejected this idea and for 20 years tried to engineer Afghanistan to make it governable. After 20 years, they spent $2.1 trillion. By the way, I should tell you, since Museveni came to power about 500 years ago, the total money he has spent in Uganda is about 104 billion. In 36 years, 104 billion. Dollars. Yeah. Of that, defense spending in the whole total is about 17 billion. You cannot begin a rebellion in any corner of Uganda and UPDF doesn't smoke you out in 2 days. The Americans spent 2.1 trillion in Afghanistan over a period of 20 years, 800 billion alone to build an Afghan army. And the day they pulled out, that army collapsed. Clearly showing that the nation building...
Lives.
Imagine that. So nation building that is engineered from outside cannot work because the knowledge necessary to understand the values, norms, habits, mentalities, behavior patterns of a particular society can never be understood by a foreign actor. If you ask me, I think that the problem UPDF is facing in Somalia is mission creep. What exactly is our aim? How are we going to measure success on that aim, and how do we exit? If UPDF answered for me that, I would be comfortable. But right now, they seem to be in an endless quagmire. And when we leave finally, by the way, if UPDF pulled out of Somalia, today, Al-Shabaab will take over tomorrow. Am I correct? So we can never defeat Al-Shabaab, and I think we should let them take over. This idea that these Al-Shabaab are going to take over Kampala and take over Nairobi and take over, they have no capacity to do so, and I do not think they have that inclination. Once they capture government, according to the United Nations, according to the AU, then they will be subject to international rules. They are easier to control when they are holding the levers of state power than when they are a rebel group out there on their own.
Professor Sada, in your reading, in your study, in your observations, engagements, whatever, name it, have you come across any country, Andrew calls it occupation, you know, where there has been foreign intervention, let me call it for the sake of diplomacy, where there has been foreign intervention, for whatever reason, good as it may, that has succeeded in re-establishing itself and then running smoothly, and the entire country accepts and says, we are now good to go. Is there any such that maybe we need to share with the people?
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. I think we also need to know, in response to that question, that history is full of conquests. Until the UN rules around the West African state and respecting national sovereignty, countries were always conquering each other. So there have been occupations and stability and development which has come out of that. But we don't want to call the UPDF mission in Somalia an occupation, because I think this is a force which went in, as those who know best have explained, to pacify a situation which was wrong. And when I was preparing for this, so I was wondering, okay, what is the dilemma we are caught up with? Of course, Andrew has explained, and the others have elaborated the security issue, and Andrew has brought in the political issue. And I was also wondering whether we could also bring in the ideological issue, which no one seems to care about. When we talk about the ideology which drives these people, the first thing is to think it is religious, and we dismiss it. Because we have been raised in an era where we believe religion has no place in politics. And that the nation-state building must be a secular project. But if that is what is inspiring fighters, and if you saw the unfair images last week, and at the bottom, you know these things they put at the bottom of TVs, that the Crusader forces from Uganda. I don't think the UPDF would ever believe they're a Crusader force. They are a Pan-African force trying to resolve a matter. These people are seeing them as crusaders because the ideology in which they are buying into is totally different from the one on which we are posturing. So there is an ideological question to resolve, and I was just wondering, so if we were to match up with the ideology, what would our ideology be? We seem to be moving in the ideology of Pan-Africanism, but they seem to be moving from another plane. Then, okay, I also say, of course, there are these counter voices, like some say, what are we doing there, we should pull out. But also what, for example, would the forefathers say? What did they think at the time they were building the African Union? And by the way, Charles, this is not the first time you've had a force going into a country to pacify it. ECOWAS was in Sierra Leone for how many years? Okay? And ECOWAS did its bit left. ECOWAS also pacified Liberia. Okay? Then
how many years did they take?
No, I mean, they pacified Liberia. Of course they didn't. But we've actually taken less in Somalia than they did in Liberia and Sierra Leone. These were very long wars, okay? So what I'm saying is, as a Pan-African brotherhood on the continent, or sisterhood for that matter, when something like this happens, what are we supposed to do? Of course, there's the existential security threat that if we do nothing, you could be visited in a very bad way, and that has ever happened here, okay? But also, supposing it had never happened, is it comfortable for us within the Pan-African construction of things and how this continent was established to just sit and do nothing, because actually it's not our problem. I think what we are suffering from, as maybe Andrew says, is mission creep, and how do we energize people? And to me, actually people are doing their best. The issue is you're dealing with a country where we hoped people would move from emergency to recovery to development, but they seem to be stuck in the emergency mode. And what does that do? It stops development from occurring. And as people sink more and more into poverty, they become even more and more vulnerable. And when they are vulnerable, then these other forces take them up. If you're not discussing Islamism, you're discussing piracy, I don't know, you're discussing droughts. So permanently, Somalis are moving from one crisis to another. But I think it would not be wise for us to sit and fold our hands because it's not us. I think that wouldn't be Pan-African enough. Actually, the forefathers would think we've betrayed the cause. But probably those who know it best can find the best way to manage the problem. But to go back to your question, have there been countries that have occupied others and stabilized them? Yes, that has occurred. That's what history is about. There have been so many conquests. But of course, with the UN framework, we have to respect national sovereignty. But there have been regional forces that have gone into a country to stabilize it, especially if it's done legitimately, like has been explained before, that was done within the processes of the UN, the AU, and the East African standby forces. So we just did wake up and go. And by the way, by the time Ugandan forces go there in 2007, Somalia had been a failed state for a very long period of time. So it's not like Uganda was just waiting to jump in. It came in after people had realized that this situation is not going anywhere. So basically, those are the kind of things. So what's the military question? What's the security question? What's the political question? What is the ideological issue? And then finally, we should then discuss how do we move with the development question. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, what do you think is the big, from your reading, what do you think is the most important question in Somalia currently? And in your view, do you think that that question needs a military, a foreign military intervention, or does it need, like Mwenda suggests, the local people to sort it out for themselves by whatever means they have at their disposal?
Thank you, Charles. And one of the things I've seen working in an NGO world is if a person goes on, say, Andrew, myself, go on and put a bore well or a well somewhere and tell the community, please use this well. Since we are not part of the construction of that well, they don't appreciate it much. And also, if their animals are beginning to dig into that well, they don't appreciate it much. They'll tell you, please come back and fix the well. The same thing. My question is, did we understand the texture and the context of what was happening in Somalia? Because there was piracy in Somalia. There was also a state in 91 when the president failed to be able to see what was there. General Kulaije has spoken about the president going there in 92, 93, and how they had to pay their way there. I also looked at the posture of the president, trying to understand the situation in that place. It's been 16 years today that they're there. And also when I looked at some of the objectives on why we have the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia, there are only two objectives. One is implementation of the Somali Transition Plan. Two, the security responsibility to the Somali force. The question is, how much have we helped, especially empowering the people there, to take over their own problems? If my family has no food, and I go to Andrew and say, please, does he take over as the head of the family in that place? Because those are some of the things I want to understand, especially with us going there. How much have we understood of the problem in that place? How much have we helped with the problem there? The general is here. Last year in December, he was there to be able to oversee an election that happened. They have a president there. How much of the empowerment have we done to let these people take over their own country? Partly I agree with Andrew when he says an occupation force, when we look at what is there. But the texture and the context, looking at Al-Shabaab, them coming in, a failed state in the 90s, a state that had different clans and tribes running the country, piracy on the ocean where goods could not come into it, but also looking at the UPDF, and credit to generals like Levi Karahanga who passed on, credit to generals like Lokech who were there, to be able to bring back Mogadishu, the parliament, the presidential palace, the airport, and a bit of sanity inside there. Some of the things I look at when I look at Al-Shabaab, they're looking for a welfare state. They don't agree with democracy. They say it's a foreign and a fallacy that is coming from the West. Do we understand what the problem is there? Because those are some of the things that really disturb me in how we communicate, how we put out the communication. How much do Ugandans know about the achievements that the army has made inside there? We know that the army is there. We know they have been there 15, 16 years. But what can they tell us that they have learned and lessons we pick from there so that they can be able to help? I also looked at some of the things that Europe and the US are withdrawing, some of the funding that is going there. How do we juggle that? Have we adjusted to the times that are there? Also, Al-Shabaab, looking at some of the clips that were there, them taking positions and looking like they were quiet for about 2014 to about 2018 there. What gap is there? What can we do better? Understanding the context from each else is very important. Understanding the people we're dealing with. Because if Andrew or Ambassador and I were to get into a fight, I have to size up my enemy. Because when I size up my enemy, I know where their weaknesses are. Have we done that? Have we understood? How much of the diplomacy have we explored to be able to, balance this, both the military and the diplomacy there?
Good point. Honorable Kulaije raised his hand earlier. He wanted to respond to Andrew immediately, but I said first let the first round, let's set the pace for the discussion, which we have done. And I will invite now each of you to, all of us, to just, interfere, interject if you can, but of course with decorum. But General, when you hear your colleagues speak, I personally get a sense they are not saying that we haven't achieved a lot. Andrew's major point seemed to be, do we have a plan? One of them, exit plan. And that has been a mainstay of some of the commentaries that we have in town, and rightly so for Ugandans. Exit plan. Do we have those plans, General?
By the way, a strategy is not the same as a plan.
Yeah, of course not. A plan is a small thing. A plan is part of a strategy.
I was saying, do we have an exit strategy?
First of all, I would request Ono Mulongo to be the one to handle the issue of the objectives and the other political questions that these two are raising. But my understanding when you talk about an exit strategy, your objectives are short term. One. Two, they are on your terms. But this is an international mission. It's not Uganda's mission. So the exit strategy does not come from Uganda, it comes from Addis Ababa. I hope I'm right in Honorable Mulongo. But we did not go to Somalia to provide the solutions. We went to Somalia to support, mark my words, to support the Somali people find solutions to their problems. A government had been formed outside the country. This government needed to have where to stay. And I am glad Timothy has actually listed. They have a state house, they have an airport now. They see every day there are about 150 flights from that airport or coming to that airport. That wasn't the case before.
Thanks to Uganda.
Thanks to Uganda. Why I raised my hand, you see, when Andrew was speaking, I wanted to ask him, who is disturbing Mozambique? Who is disturbing the entire Sahel region? Who is disturbing Nigeria, Chad, and Niger? Actually, Boko Haram came from Somalia. And we were laughing at the Nigerians that if you had deployed at the time you had requested, maybe you would have stole the Boko Haram from source. Today, the foreign countries are on the verge of collapse. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, Central African Republic,
Northern Cameroon,
and the Sudan. They are on the verge. So, as we are looking at the Somali question, we should expand our horizon to see the threats facing the entire continent. And yes, the financials are pulling out, but individual countries are increasing their presence. The Americans you're talking about, they have a force in Somalia, unofficially. So individual countries from the powerful ones, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, they are increasing their presence in Somalia, courtesy of what Uganda created. At first they were not there. So for me, as we talk about Uganda's relevance in that place, exit strategy, important as it is, it must be based on the objectives that took you there in the first instance. Lastly, are we happy that indeed we have states that are collapsing? And then you have a corridor that comes all the way from Chad through Central Africa into the DRC. Now even Congo Brazzaville is getting the heat of instability. Ladies and gentlemen, what should we wait for to take action so that we can insulate our country from some of these threats? You may wish to know that the Islamists who are disturbing Mozambique actually started from southern Tanzania. But because of Tanzania's foundation security that is strong, they failed to find route. They failed to create a base and were ejected. That's how they moved to Mozambique, into the scars of the Renamo rebellion. The rest, I give a chance to my colleagues.
Okay. Yes, the professor.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add that even when we look like we're the only ones in Somalia, if you look at countries like Djibouti, almost every big country has a military base in Djibouti. You're talking about the US, you're talking about France, you're talking about Japan, you're talking about China, you're talking about... So everyone is actually watching that place, the Horn of Africa. So it's they're just not, and by that used to be the French Somaliland, okay? So that was all part of Somalia. So you have them there, they're just not committing enough by putting boots on the ground to have the forces there. But everyone is concerned about this thing and everyone's watching. So maybe Uganda needs to be credited for being there, but probably what we need to ask for those who have worked and deployed there is why some parts of Somalia tend to be a little bit more peaceful, like Somaliland, that we have refused to recognize as AU, and then others seem to be more chaotic. And also maybe to wonder, could some of the, not maybe solutions, but some of the problems lie within the structure or the fabric of Somali society, that the warlords have been part of Somalia's history since imperial times, okay? And maybe isn't it high time we thought about nation building which caters for these kinds of groupings, other than having, as Andrew says, one group will fight and win another, because it looks to be a country which doesn't seem to have that kind of social architecture. But maybe it could be a country which has this, which maybe we should rethink the model of having, how do we nurture different groupings, traditional but also modern, and then to find a way of surviving. But it's not true that it's only Uganda with interests in the Horn. Actually, there are bigger forces that have bigger interests in the Horn of Africa. Thank you.
Honorable Mlongo, you earlier in your starting comment, you referred to Western civilization and Islamization. I don't know whether it was Nyangweso or Andrew who referred to it as labeling and, you know, akin to, you know, the saying in Nigeria that you plant goat ears on something or someone in order to eat it first. I think it is the Nigerians, because it is the Igbo of Nigeria who are so rich in good African language and proverbs. Do you think that alone, from the context I got it, and I hope I got it right, is the right reason to be going after some Africans or some other people and saying that let's stop them from doing this, and yet on the whole it sounds like really fighting an American war and not our African war?
You know, one time when Chankwanzi and Professor Mamdan came to present something about the war in Sudan, and he argued that Uganda's going to South Sudan was in line with the directives from the White House to be able to form part of the wider strategy of America's counterterrorism in the region. And I reminded him that when IGAD, at that time led by President Museveni, came up with declaration of principles that aimed at separation of the state from the region, issues of resource sharing, power sharing, and the principle of self-determination, became the founding principles around which South Sudan got independence. And they went through the processes, including the plebiscite that people voted overwhelmingly in favor of independence. And I thought Professor Mamdani's arguments were narrower. You know, we espouse schools of thought. And when you see liberalists bringing in ideas of saying, you know, leave them to fight until the weakest dies and the strongest thrives, and that we don't have a direct threat, and therefore it simply tells you that your understanding is in certain line. But some realists also, as a very strong school, have arguments that support their approaches and understanding and interpretation of situations. Realists don't just leave things to chance.
Yeah.
Realists shape the politics, the geopolitics, and the world order. You don't just look at a threat and pray and say, yes, because of your prayers, it will go. You must come up with a plan, with a strategy as to how you can rectify the situation. if we can underestimate the threat of Islamic fundamentalism and extremism in the Horn of Africa, when they are linked to the Middle East, that they left the trail of ashes, you know, and collapse of states and re-engineering of the statehood in the Middle East, then I don't know whether we understand the weight of this matter in Africa. And I'm happy that General Klaja has raised the issue, including the professor, giving examples where this nascent idea has managed to sprout and is covering huge stretches of lands in Africa. And you should know that the earliest idea of this radical Islamic fundamentalism emerged from the caliphate. The caliphate was defined specifically to grow and overwhelm the global world. The literature is available where the plans are in place to overwhelm the whole world, Islamize it. And these people may look like they're just a small group from Somalia, but they're not just from Somalia. These are people who recruited widely from the region. These are people who trained in the Middle East, Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and other parts, you know, of Syria. And these are the people who came back here. And they didn't come back because they're an isolated island in Somalia. If you remember the conference in Khartoum, I think it was in 1992, in which a decision was made to control the strategic waters and be able to link the North Africa Islamic groups through Uganda to the coast of East Africa. And that's how they started infiltrating and forming humanitarian groups with some similar names in here, in Ethiopia and elsewhere.
Under the tutelage of this ideologue.
In Sudan.
In Sudan.
Yes.
What did I'm forgetting?
Al-Turabi.
Al-Turabi, yes. Al-Turabi. And they fell out later on, of course, with Bashir. But these people engendered a plan that was much broader than this. We have information on this, intelligence on this. And we knew what kind of plans they were trying to engender, put in place. So the whole thing is a scheme that is supposed to play out in a much wider perspective. And so we could not take it lightly. And of course, here in the region, people like President Museveni have been struggling to build economic blocks. And these economic blocks are supposed eventually to be used as blocks for bringing Africa together. And there's no way Eastern Africa can develop a block that is reasonable enough without Somalia. The strategic position, the geoposition of Somalia is so critical that you cannot just leave it out. And no wonder all international actors have bases there. So to me, there was a clear definition of the threat in Somalia. The other reason is that the military are perhaps the most precise planners. There is no way they can stake the personnel, the equipment, without thorough understanding of the operating environment. I was part of the people who went to Somalia quietly well before even the advanced group. And we saw what we saw and brought back information. And the military also sent a team there quietly to do the assessment, to determine the positions, the strength of the Union courts, Islamic Union courts. They came back. And therefore, they determined the nature of resources that the military needed.
Was that General, I think, was it General Eluelu?
Let's not make names here.
I remember they made a report.
Yes, there's a report. And these reports were done not just by us. We also had technical information, technical intelligence that we shared from other partners, from which the military came up with a proper order of battle that was going to be used to begin Operation Somalia. They knew about the conditions at the airport. And when they landed, this is a vertical insertion. We didn't just come walking and sailing around. It was a vertical insertion.
Honorable, if I may just compliment you.
Yes.
We never deploy in a major theater without an estimate process, which must have the mission, must have the execution, and then you must have the plan of executing that mission. And then you must determine the end state. Meaning, Until the end state is realized, you cannot talk about an exit strategy. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. And indeed, I can tell you that there's a lot of bookwork in terms of planning that went into this. And before we went, we had to weigh the opportunities, the threat levels, and what things we should tackle first when we arrive, what should follow next, and so on and so forth. I'll tell you that Uganda is going there, followed by Burundi, and then, of course, other member states that came on board. All this contributed to enriching the objectives. And this objective was discussed thoroughly at technical level before they went through diplomatic frameworks. We have clear objectives, we have clear strategies, we have clear plans for executing these strategies. And each year we review them and either enhance or even reduce, but adjust them in such a way that they will make fulfillable conditions for us to be seeing their performance. And we have the performance. The conditions and indicators are very clear. Now, the exit strategy is in place. This is the one that we had even before we went there. And this is only pegged on the timelines depending on the conditions. You see, you can't just say 3 years. How long was it? I saw you interjecting with the questions about West Africa. You're not telling us how long the Middle East crisis and the missions that are deployed there since 1950. You're not mentioning about Lebanon.
We want to
You're not mentioning even DRC. How long have they been there?
We want to start from
exactly.
home.
So I think that it's wrong for us to begin just putting a timeline on something that is not following the conditions being achieved. Now, is UPDF the occupational force? Totally no.
Not at all.
An occupational force is well defined, whether in the dictionary or even in practice. We are there as a part of the multilateral effort. And as the General Colleague put it and other colleagues, we are very well defined in our work. And the war is being prosecuted in phases. There's where there is an active war. There is where there is reconstruction going on. Civil work, state reconstruction, institutionalizing the state apparatus into the ground, establishing local government structures. There is where there is rehabilitation going on, rebuilding wells, water wells, and the road network if you go to various parts of Somalia. And there is where the political class is active. Parliament is active, both in the center and the regions. So it is not just a one bomb thing that now we are busy shooting guns all day, all night, all week, all month. No.
In fact, I carried a video here. I thought it would be screened of the construction work going on in Mogadishu.
It's a lot. The airport is busier than even almost Nairobi. It's not just like Nairobi.
Actually,
all international actors are now in Mogadishu.
Actually, in one of the interviews the president gave to the University of Cornell, one of these days when he went there, he was actually saying that the territory Al-Shabaab was controlling has reduced, I think, from 25 to around 17 or now 11. So there is also that taking place.
So what if I just to finalize on this, what I agree with my comrade young Jaja is that
you don't want to mention their names.
It's like, of course, my young Jaja Andrew, and he's a colonel general. He's right that there are still many problems. And these problems, as we shall see, are more exogenous to us as a mission, TCCs, than ourselves. For example, the doctrine of the UN. UN is for peacekeeping, for us we're for warfare. In Somalia,
Peace building.
there's no peace to keep.
Actually, peacemaking.
Yes, ours is combat mission. And as such, there is an incongruous approaches between the two. Like they cannot fly into a theater to evacuate, for example, the injured. They fly 100 kilometers away, and so we have had challenges with that. The logistics, the supply system is a UN one, and it cannot fit properly with us. The other one is the internal politics contradiction that have not been resolved. The center and the peripheral, and that really delay us. Up to now, the constitution has not been concluded. But they are moving slowly, gradually towards some agreement, some consensus. Things like the geopolitics. Each of the key players have their own interests there. The Americans have their own interests, and so are Russians, so are the European Union, so are the Emiratis, and so on and so forth. So, and then they are the ones who removed the role of training from us. They're the ones who are training, and they give us some miniature numbers every year. And yet they are asking us to draw down based on finances. You see, you cannot use economic reasons to determine a security situation. So all these things are the ones that deter us from actually completing the job very quickly. So to me, I'm convinced that the UPDF is very well situated in Somalia, very well qualified and doing a rightful job. And the issue of resolution is going to be by the Somalis. And that's why I agree with Andrew, the issue of resolution is by the Somalis. And remember, terrorism is an ideological warfare. It's not just a boot and a gun. But we are trying to phase out that part of the gun, the ammunition. See, fire must be responded with fire. But at the same time, we're dealing with the software. I have been engaging in talks with some Al-Shabaab leaders, and some who went there for other reasons have managed to respond and come out. But there are those hardliners who believe that they can never accept anything Western. And just like Boko Haram and other areas, they reject anything to come from the West. If there is such total disagreement, departure, one side has to win. And that's where
through dialogue.
First of all, through other means, until there is a mutually hurting stalemate that Andrew was mentioning. Mutually hurting stalemate where both sides come to agree. But for now, they still think that they're above. The higher.
The question is, how sustainable is all those? And we will, I will, I think between Andrew and Tim, I'll need that question answered as well. But when we come back from the break, let's take the break now. This is Behind the Headlines.
You know,
This is the University of Africa. On the streets, you get your real education. Here, everybody has a degree of something. But the most important qualification is imagination. Reason to imagine is slay. His reason is to be the goat. Theirs is to take the beat and make it lit. They want to test edgy until it is fire. Their reason for imagination is to add riz in style. Her reason to imagine is finesse. And hers is to find what's new and bussin'. So no matter what your situation, just use your imagination.
Do you know your architect? Is your architect registered? An architect in Uganda is one registered with the Architects Registration Board, ARB. ARB is a statutory body mandated to regulate and maintain standards and practice of architecture in Uganda. Save money and life that is often lost in collapsing buildings as a result of employing quacks to supervise your construction sites. Remember, only registered architects have professional indemnity in the event of loss of your property. To learn more about the benefits of using a registered architect, visit www.arbuganda.go.ug now, or call us on 0781 498 823 or find us at PKF Building, Kira Road, Kampala. ARB is here to ensure professionalism in the architectural industry.
Did you know that you can safely and conveniently make your school fees payments anytime, any school, anywhere using Airtel Money? Oh yes! Simply pick up your phone and dial *185#. Select option 6, school fees. Choose between school pay, peg pay, or shore pay. Enter student number. Enter amount, confirm name and transaction. Enter Airtel Money PIN. A confirmation message will be sent to you upon a successful transaction. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
This isn't just a girl. She is the future. This is a teacher. a doctor, a community leader, our future president.
She is our family's pride, and as her father, I will protect her from child marriage and talk to her about the dangers of teenage pregnancy. We each have a role to play in empowering our teenage girls to protect them from child marriage and pregnancy, because when we empower them, we empower our nation. Protect the girl, save the nation.
Take action. Report any case of defilement or child marriage to the police or call Sauti 116.
Jerry con. Jerry con. Hey, Master Blaster. Touch him, man. Bang Jerry con with muscle. Those ones who say go for you only. Mundava. Best groups I teach you. But never go with the muscari. Because of the cover that is very far. Is you serious? Is serious you? What? Yeah? You step it on it. Add kilometers to your legs, and you get your sugar. We buy meat from Umaru, and Umaru refused to give you enough meat. Show him that they don't joke with you.
Okukakaluka n'okulungi kwetaagako omuntu akuyambako, n'olwekyo tujja kukuteerawo embeera esaanidde osobole okukola ekisinga. Awamu teri kitulema.
Mwami Musoke, njose nekusanga.
Ate kiki?
Munnange, anti gwamanya okunyinyonyola ebintu by'emisolo bino nembitegeera.
Ate kiki leero?
Mbadde ku dduuka nempulira nga abakyala bagamba mbu tulina okwewandiisa mu nkola ya IFRIS.
Tukikolanga?
Ate nkimbadde
kituufu nnyo.
Mbadde sikimanyi na kiki.
Eyo y'enkola egenda okutuyamba okulwaninga bizinesi zaffe mu ngeri ya digital.
Etya?
Oba olina okuwandiisa bizinesi yo mu IFRIS, osobola okumanya omuwendo gw'ebintu by'olina mu bizinesi yo, enfulumya n'ennyingiza mu bizinesi yo. Awo URA esobola okukola omulimu gwayo ogw'emisolo obulungi.
Nedda Mwami Musoke, kye sitegeera. IFRIS eyingira etya mu bizinesi yange?
Kakati enkola eno ya IFRIS eyingiza bizinesi yo mu sisitemu ya URA, kubanga tekyali kya buntu bulamu okugerekera omusolo ogutali mutuufu abateebereza buteebereza.
Ekyo kituufu ddala bannange, ekyo kituufu. Kubanga mazima obadde omusolo kubadde gwapaala bupaazi, ng'ogenda n'osasula omusolo gw'otomanyiiko omutwe n'amagulu, kwegamba bambi nga tekiriiyo.
Olaba? Kakati ate n'ekirala, IFRIS eyamba okukuuma ebiwandiiko bya bizinesi yo, kuba biyinza okubulako, biyinza okukwata omuliro, naye kati wano IFRIS biba biri digitalized.
Bannange nenkola ntya okwewandiisa?
Kyangu nnyo, waludde dda. Okwewandiisa mu nkola ya IFRIS, genda ku kibanja kya URA, www.ura.go.ug. Awo olondeko e-invoicing. Awo no ogoberere endagiriro. URA, tukulaakulanyize wamu Uganda.
We are back on air. This is Behind the Headlines. This Wednesday, the 31st of May 2023. We are discussing the Somalia question, and we are asking ourselves whether it is right to resolve a civil dispute through foreign solutions. Can Uganda militarily or politically be a solution to the problem of Somalia, or indeed any other country in the place of Uganda? There are a number of countries with interests, as we have already heard. To discuss all these issues, we have in the studio Honorable Felix Kulaije, I need to get it correctly, a defense spokesperson, which is different from the one I had earlier talked about.
It is higher. It's higher than UPDF.
Yes,
it's a defense.
With higher money.
And yes, so Honorable Kulaije, you are in trouble with these people. We have Timothy Nyangweso, we have Old Man Andrew Mwenda, we have Honorable Simon Mulongo and Professor Sally. I wanted to bring in Andrew, but Andrew, just before I bring you, let me just pick some few messages that have come from out there, people listening to you. Congo Ahmadi Adam says, Charles, this is a great show. Whoever undermines the contribution of the UPDF in stabilizing Somalia is simply ignorant. Somalia was a failed state at the time our peacekeepers went there. Everyone feared to go there. In fact, when I visited Somalia, particularly Mogadishu and Lower Shebele in 2019, the locals I engaged with were so appreciative of UPDF. They said they needed the Ugandan army to stay longer and protect them from the Al-Shabaab. Then we have, this one says, good evening, Charles. Was Kony insurgency in northern Uganda Islamization movement too, as claimed by the security analyst in the studio? Who has studied the Al-Shabaab movement in Somalia? How has the UPDF intelligence team failed to detect such a danger in a dangerous place like Somalia, given their experience already in that country? And then this one has written a whole composition, too long, so I can't read it. It is too long. Kindly write a short message so that you can read very fast. This person says, I'm Mugabe Edson Kagadi. Kindly let our government bring all our brothers and sisters back into our country, Uganda, because those Al-Shabaab are fighting for their freedom in Somalia. Why should the UPDF die for that? And then, another, Agaba Smart in Barara. I'm going to read just a very brief one. He says, he asks whether the campaign, the military campaign in Somalia is sustainable, and then he's also asking Honorable Kulaije. He says, Honorable Kulaije, what are the objectives that took us to Somalia? And if there was a master exit strategy in Addis Ababa, Ugandans should have had its small exit strategy and integrate it into a bigger strategy. But Agaba, that is too long. This one is called Mugabe. No, this one I have already read. Guys can write very long messages. This one says, I am Martin Erongo, watching from the Soroti city. Good evening, Charles, and thank you for inviting such brilliant panelists to discuss issues pertaining the security of our country, region, and the continent at large. On the Somali question, I strongly support our military involvement in that mission if it is to guarantee that our country will be safe from foreign attacks. I'm going to take two more and I bring back the discussion to the panel here. Hi, Charles. Thanks for the best show. Oh, thank you so much. If it is the best show from your reading, I appreciate. He says, 3 questions. UPDF is due to leave in 2024. Is Somalia ready to take over? Who is funding the Al-Shabaab, and why are there no efforts to deal with the funders? Why aren't we seeing more efforts to eliminate Al-Shabaab out of Somalia? This seems to have stalled in the recent past and seems to have given them more time to regroup. This is Richard from Kampala. Let me take the last one for now. This person is called Tushave Chris Karobwa from Fort Portal. He says, the ADF are after disturbing Uganda. Are we safe if Islamists are near us? He says, the reasons for being in Somalia are acceptable to me, but I'm told that Parliament was never involved. Is that so? No. I think Parliament was.
It was involved.
Parliament was at that time. Doesn't this make it illegitimate? I think all the other following arguments fall off.
Can I give you a joinder of appreciating you?
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the wonderful intellectual debate on the behind the headlines. It's quite a team of brilliant ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, the issue of sustainability, and from different perspectives you can add, but Honorable Mulongo talks passionately, and I like it, about Uganda's involvement, and especially on the Pan-African front. But we have a president who loves Pan-Africanism. Are we sure that if Mwenda took over today, he would be a darling of, or an advocate of Pan-Africanism as President Museveni himself, or any other person for that matter?
Well, first of all, I think that Museveni could have had multiple motivations to be in Somalia. I do not doubt his Pan-African sentiments, but also there are important geopolitical considerations Museveni was looking at. You see, Somalia straddles what they call the Gulf of Aden.
Yeah.
And through that Gulf, a significant share of world trade that moves through the Suez Canal passes through the Gulf of Aden. About 30% of global trade, or 25% of global trade. That's very big. Now, what was happening in Somalia is that because of the absence of a state to control activity on the land, pirates had organized in the ports of Kismayu and Mogadishu and other areas, and they were attacking ships in the Gulf of Aden and stealing and looting them. The world powers, who have the biggest stake in global trade, had deployed massive navies to control the pirates. But if you are, even the most basic military strategy is that if you want to control piracy, it's very important to control the land grounds from which pirates attack ships. So I think that President Museveni saw an opportunity in this global interplay of forces where the world powers had deployed massive navies on the oceans to control piracy. If you could occupy the grounds, then the pirates would have no place to launch their attacks on ships. So what does that do for him? It immediately places Museveni at the center of an important geopolitical challenge. If he has human rights violations in Uganda, or whatever it is, since he is the one controlling the land and therefore helping the big powers contain the pirates, they would turn a blind eye. They will not disturb him so much. So I believe that beyond his Pan-African credentials, he must also have calculated that it was important for his own project of consolidation in Uganda to secure his position and avoid these Western powers harassing him on these issues of democracy, human rights, corruption, this and this. He is their guy. He's fighting their war. So that is an important consideration for him. But I want to come to the other issues because both Simon and Felix have not satisfied me. Because I started by saying we have a mission, and then he said the mission is, Felix said it's determined by the UN, and now he says no, UPDF had a mission. If you have a mission, you have a set of objectives, you have defined the key success areas you're looking at, or what you define as success, it must also have a time frame. It cannot be open-ended. There must be an idea that this is what I'm going to do, and I'm giving myself the following time frame within which to do it. It's possible you may fail to realize your objectives within a particular time frame, then you can extend it. But right now, our deployment in Somalia has no time frame. I'm going to be there for 500 years. And if you're there for 500 years, is that helpful to the people of Somalia? Let me give you guys an example. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, there were various rebel groups across Africa. Let me begin with the 60s and 70s. America accused those rebel movements, all of them, of being communist. That's why I'm very reluctant to endorse this American narrative that there is some radical Islamic militants who want to take over the world. The Americans themselves are trying to spread their gospel on how to govern a country. These Americans and the Western Europeans across the whole world. They have one script. Every country should follow that script. So, I think they project their behavior on the Islamists. Although I'm also aware that Christianity and Islam are a monotheistic religions, but also deeply evangelical. They believe that there is only one God, and that is either through Muhammad or through Jesus, and then it must be spread peaceably or by force across the whole world. These people from Western Europe, they may have abandoned Christianity as a religion, but they continue to embrace Christian values and mentalities as a secular creed. So they have replaced Christianity with democracy. So they want to spread democracy everywhere, human rights everywhere. Not even democracy as you define it, but democracy as they have defined it, they have shaped it, so that everybody should mimic them. And I think the Islamists may be like them. So what's the difference between them trying to spread their values and the beliefs across the whole world and the Islamists trying to do the same? So these are two fundamentalists in contest. But the bottom line is this.
In any case, they are all religious beliefs.
They are all religious fundamentalists. One is now a secular religion. Christianity has been secularized using the word democracy. Islam has retained its religious tunic. But the point I was trying to make is that I am worried that we're in Somalia without an end state that is clearly defined. And Felix, I want us to define what is the end state we want. If that is the end state, how long do we expect to take to achieve it? And what will be the key success areas that that are measurable? Because we must have something that is specifically defined. This is the success area. We should be able to measure it, and we say these are the success areas. Once realized, then we have done. And this is a time frame within which this mission will be achieved. And that time frame can be adjusted in case either we achieve it early or late. Right now, this is an open-ended thing, and that's why I do not share it. The second thing, I'm keenly aware that this broad brush of Islamic militancy that's trying to take over the world obscures many of the issues inside Somalia, because inside Somalia, there are clans. Al-Shabaab and previously the Islamic Coast Union from which sprang are the only movements that tend to transcend the clan politics and build a pan-Somali identity around Islam. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So I'll give you my personal experience. There was a journalist who used to work for Reuters in Nairobi, who joined the Islamic Coast Union. And I used to know him. He was called Hassan something. So I knew him and I used to communicate with him a lot. When the Islamic Coast Union emerged initially, because Al-Shabaab is an offspring of the Islamic Coast Union,
yes,
they were very successful at defeating all the other contestants for power militarily, and took over the whole of most of Somalia and captured Mogadishu, using Islam as an organizing ideology. At that time, I was a visiting fellow at Stanford University. Because this journalist used to give me a lot of information about the Islamic Coast Union, and I was keen to see that is there one organization, movement that can unite the whole of Somalia and wrestle control of the instruments of repression and coercion and violence from others and monopolize them. You know, the state in Uganda monopolizes the legitimate use of violence. If I box you right now, police will arrest me. If I try to go and occupy Kanyanda here with my soldiers, UPDF will smoke me out. So there is a monopoly of the legitimate exercise of violence in the central state called Uganda. That's what Somalia lacks. Everybody, you can exercise your own violence, everybody can. Violence has been privatized, decentralized among clans and sub-clans. The Islamic Coast Union had monopolized that violence. So I saw the Americans saying, oh, they must intervene. So the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs at that time was Jendai Fraser, whom I knew very well. So I flew from California at my own expense to the State Department in Washington, D.C. For many Ugandans who may not realize that, it's like flying from here to Nigeria. It's very far, 6 hours of a flight. I went there and said, Jendai, I have come here to beg you. I'm giving you contacts with these people. Talk to them. Let them consolidate power in Somalia. That is where the solution for that country will come. Once they're in power, you can use carrots and sticks to impose some degree of discipline on them. Actually, this is an interesting thing, and Jendai Fraser is still alive, anybody can ask her. She agreed with me. When I left and went back to California about 4 days later, I saw the Americans with planes bombing, supporting the ground troops of the Ethiopians. So I realized the following things. The Islamic Coast Union, I think, had somehow been allied to Isaias Afewerki of
Eritrea.
Yes, and he had supported them.
That's true.
Meles Zenawi in Ethiopia saw that as a danger, that now Eritrea, who are his competitors, have a foothold in Somalia, or his enemies have a foothold in Somalia, they can use it to destabilize him. So Ethiopia was intervening to defend its own interest, not the interest of Somalia. So, and at that time, the people who were controlling power in the United States, in the Republican Party in the last days of Bush, Condoleezza Rice had been, I think, a lecturer of Jendai Fraser at Harvard. Then the other person on Africa, this lady, Rosa Whittaker, and others, they were very influential within the American system, and they had very close links with the Zenawi. So Zenawi convinced them to bring American power to provide area support to his ground troops. So they entered and removed the Islamic Coast Union. Once they had removed it, the young people of the Islamic Coast Union said, no, we cannot accept this. They formed Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is something to do with youth or students.
Yes.
Youth. To say we cannot accept it. So that is how the Americans later were able to recognize the mistake, including when they realized the mistake, they supported, I think, Uganda when we were there. We went and collected the leader of the Islamic Coast Union. What was the guy's name?
Sheikh Sharif Ahmed.
Sheikh Sharif Ahmed, and we took him there to be president. But by that time, he had lost credibility. He had lived in Kenya for a long time, and the Al-Shabaab had taken control, and they considered him a traitor when he came back. So, for me, I have this belief that as far as possible, we need to find a solution to the Somali question that emerges from the actual contestants in Somalia. I'll give you an example. President Yoweri Museveni, I need to find an opportunity to discuss this with him, because in 1979, he saw the problem of UNLF. UNLF could never have held power here, because he had gone to Obote and suggested to him, you have Chikos Malum, I have Fronasa. Why don't we create a 50-50 alliance of the fighting forces of effective control on the violence? And that becomes the post-Amin government. He was defeated by the Nabuderes, who convinced Nyerere. They said you can create an umbrella government of so many groups that were opportunistic. They brought them there, said that you can now organize elections without effective control on the core military institutions of state, which is the military. The thing failed. Finally, Chikos Malum took power after a while when Obote came back, and the NRA, or Fronasa became NRA, went to the bush, and there was a decisive victory by one side. And then he was able to mount relatively unified action to restabilize Uganda. That experience needs to be done in Somalia. This continuous holding elections of opportunistic politicians who have come from abroad and also where exile politicians and thinking that they can reconstruct the state of Somalia, they will not. The Somali state will be constructed by Somalis. And I am inclined to believe it is not those who sit in air-conditioned offices and speak the language of Muzungu, of democracy, human rights, and things like that. It is those who will go into the battlefield.
Western civilization.
Because you see, the West mislead us. Those countries, they had people like Napoleon and others who came and centralized violence and created modern states. Once they had established order, issues like democracy, markets, whatever it is, were constructed on a stable political foundation. Without a stable political order, you cannot be able to do anything else. So stability is first, and that stability is achieved through effective control of the instruments of violence.
Okay.
The violence has to be domesticated. Now, let me come to a few other issues I wanted to raise on this matter. You see, both Felix and Simon raised the issue of the UN in Congo. The UN has been in Congo for how many years? 60. Is Congo stable? No. They went to Palestine there. They've been there for 70, 80 years. Is it stable?
Cyprus.
They went to Lebanon. They went to Cyprus. So the United Nations, even us putting our forces under the UN, is a problem. The UN, what it does is, because it pays high salaries, it tends to create careerism. It shifts the mission from a mission where there is a political project to achieve a political end, it becomes a bureaucratic mission to enjoy privileges and good salaries. And that's what is happening in Congo. How much money have they spent on MONUSCO? The UN spends $2 billion per year on MONUSCO in Congo. They cannot even control one village against ADF. UPDF total budget in a year is 1 billion, and I think in Congo we spend maybe 50 million or 60 million. We have been able to stabilize it. It shows you that things to do with the UN just don't work. Why? Because the structure of incentives for the UN is wrong. It distorts the realities on the ground in a way that you have soldiers and countries enjoying good pay and therefore lose sight of the mission. Now, my granddaughter, she was saying that Museveni went and said the space controlled by Al-Shabaab has shrunk. I advise you to read about the Vietnam War. You know, remember in the Vietnam War, General Westmoreland they developed a concept and the Americans adopted it, saying that the crossover point, that we shall have won if we reach a crossover point where the number of South Vietnamese we kill, or the Viet Cong we kill, exceeds the ability of the Viet Cong to replenish.
This was the Somali president himself.
Exactly. It never worked. Finally, the Americans left with
the statement she's saying, she's quoting the Somali president.
The Somali president, yes. It doesn't matter. It's not the geographical space they control. Yeah. It is actually effective fighting power that they have. Can that man hold that country together for 2 weeks if UPDF pulled out? He can't. So I personally feel like if I was UPDF.
By the way, can I give information?
Yes.
The attack on Friday and Burundi last month was because the Somali National Army had beaten Al-Shabaab from Hiran. They retreated now to Lower Shabelle because there is a bigger population to disappear into and it is food. But otherwise, the Somali National Army.
Really?
Yes.
Because my own experience, I've been on a tour of Somalia twice.
even yesterday, Al-Shabaab tried to attack their base, and 17 remained in the battlefield of Al-Shabaab. So,
but let me tell you this, Felix, let me tell you a story. There was a time the EU had a military mission here in Bihanga.
Yes, I know.
They were training the Somali army. You had the Germans, the French, the best militaries in the world were training the TFG troops, Transitional Federal Government of Somalia troops. Then they would give them boots, uniforms, the best guns, and salaries, and they take them to Somalia. A battalion would be about 736 soldiers. Those 736 would encounter Al-Shabaab 30. They would scatter them. 30! So when one time the Prime Minister of Somalia came here to see President Museveni, I happened to be there. And Museveni asked him, and they were discussing this issue of Sat Al-Shabaab dismantling an entire battalion of 736. And Museveni, because he has very good insights in military things, he asked the Prime Minister, he said, what are your soldiers fighting for? And that man failed to answer it.
They must have a cause.
Yes, so soldiers must have a cause. The Al-Shabaab have a cause. You can call it Allah, whatever you can call it, but they have a very clear ideological basis for their fight. And these ones, in any case, we would train them, they would go back to Somalia, many of them would desert the army and go back to their clans. You see, this is the problem with Somalia. That you have the national army, it goes back into its clans. And America faced it in Afghanistan. A lot of the Afghan national army troops that America was training and arming, today they would be with the Americans, that night they would go back to the Taliban. And the Americans they could never fathom why do people still pay homage to the Taliban? Why do Somalis still pay homage to Al-Shabaab? Uganda needs to ask that question. Is it true if the AU forces pulled out, that army, the national army of Somalia, can hold it? And the taste of the pudding is in the eating. Pull out.
You want it tested?
Pull out. I rest my
You
case.
want it tested and tested. But Andrew referred to something very interesting when he made a comment about Congo mission. And the president has referred to that. I don't know, Honorable Kulaije, whether you want to, in terms of sustainability and our strength, the issue of turning a mission into, allowance, and which can create problems that it can create. When the president referred to it, and the president said the attack should be used to remind all those concerned that operations in Somalia and other theaters are combat missions and not welfare missions where you can access UN allowances. Honorable Kulaije, as a spokesperson, was this a warning to our boys and to our men and women in boots to do better, to re-strengthen themselves, to re-strategize, to refocus, or was he just making a statement, a general statement? Was this specific?
It was specific.
Why?
He has intelligence.
Of course, the best.
And therefore, he's basing on that intelligence to caution us. And for us, those are learning lessons to check ourselves internally, and if these weaknesses indeed exist, deal with them. Two, his argument all along, I remember I engaged him in 1990 over the question of allowances, and he said to me, I don't support allowances. He's been consistent. Because indeed, they kill the spirit of voluntarism. All right? The military is a volunteer profession. It's a sacrificial profession. There is no amount of money that is equal to my life. So by the time I decide to join the military, the purpose, the motivation must be beyond the money. If it is pecuniary, you are a mercenary and you will not do what you're supposed to do. That notwithstanding, he's been asking about the objective. What's the objective of the UN? Wherever they have gone, they will tell you it's peacekeeping. They deliberately avoid peacemaking, which is in chapter 8. Because chapter 7, I think, peacemaking is an expensive venture.
Project, yeah.
So they don't want to dare there. However, they want you to read between lines for Somalia that you, the sub-regional force, which has come, the regional force which is from African Union, should make peace without them approving it. Now, there was a major objective of
Is that one of the limitations that we have at the theater? Is that one of the limitations?
As you know, we went out and made it. We went out despite that. Otherwise, Mogadishu would still be in the hands of Al-Shabaab.
But I'm told right now we are limited. We did it earlier.
The limitation is the drawdown. Troops have been scaled down on the demand of the financiers. And therefore, that also reduces, we had to, I think, collapse some of the bases, the forward operating bases, to meet that demand. So that brings in the question, what was the objective in supporting the African Union mission, now which they have renamed ATMIS? Two, he mentioned the issue of careerism. If you have gone as a careerist, you do not want your career to end. So you will not end the problem. In fact, one of the trainers in the Singo did ask, why are you guys in a hurry to end the problems in Somalia? Imagine that question. Why are you in a hurry? So they wanted us to make it a career. Our objective was never to impose Uganda's will on Somalia. From the word go, the message was, we are here to support you solve your problem. And that's why we want acceptability, because we lived the talk and they saw it. The trust they gave us was because indeed we never imposed our will, and two, we never went out to attack. We fought in the self-defense. Three, even those who were captured, they were rehabilitated and absorbed in the national forces. Those factors, and then four, the humanitarian aspect. Despite the objection of the UN, who are saying we have no right to share our medical supplies with the civilians.
Yeah.
But for us, that was a winner. It has worked in Uganda, it has worked elsewhere. So we provided the safe drinking water, we treated their sick. We have a hero, Brigadier General Dr. Chiengo, who restored hope to the fistula victims. They had lost hope. This guy operated upon them, and they were all back in society. They had been rejected. We treated them in our hospital. We shared whatever we had. That wins you the hearts and the minds.
Including Al-Shabaab.
Including Al-Shabaab.
Yeah.
So, we must understand why does UPDF succeed wherever it goes? Check. Wherever we go, we become a darling of the population because of those approaches. Do our backers share the same vision?
Their interests are different.
Whereas Andrew is criticizing the elections of the elite, it's a starting point. One, we give Somalia a base of the basket. There is a semblance of a state. All right? Two, as Simon put it, there are elections in the regions and at national level. For a Somali to see elections since the 60s, because the last election they had
69.
was 69. This is unbelievable. And like we observed, the business activity in Mogadishu simply shows
I thought
you
it was in 67.
the last election. I mean in 67.
The incumbent president was actually defeated and handed over power. Then 2 years later,
Siadibare took over.
Yeah, in 69.
So you can say after 40 or 50 years, there is something called voting. There is an airport to come to. There is construction going on in the city. I have pictures of 2007 and 8 of Mogadishu. When you look at them and the current Mogadishu, someone will say, please, this is not what you are this is not real. Those pictures of 2007, 2009 would look alien. Honestly, if this is not what to be proud of as Africans, leave alone Uganda alone, something must be wrong with us. But like I said earlier,
do it well.
Yes, we do.
Like you started. Let this kind of statement that is coming from the president not come again. That's the message, I guess. As a Ugandan, proud of the UPDF.
My last take on that one. You see, as long as the devil is still in charge of the world, these things will happen.
Is he in charge?
The devil? Check.
No.
But you said Jesus Christ did his bit and win.
Actually,
he is fighting to take over the
of
world.
course, you see, for him, he's an imitator.
Yes.
He imitates the authority of God. And he penetrates your hearts. I normally give people the example of Job chapter 1, verse 6. It says, when the children of God were gathered, even Satan was there.
Of course.
So if he was able to be in heaven, what will defeat him from coming into my heart or yours?
No, I just think that the devil is around, except his actions can really shock sometimes. Even 2% of his actions.
Yeah.
I think we need to start good discussion, but we need to end nonetheless. We are left with 10 minutes, so I'm going to give each of you 2, since you're 5. starting with Professor. Way forward and what your thoughts are, and maybe a message from each of you to the troops and to their families, just in the 2 minutes, Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. You've asked which way forward, and I also remember when you started, you told us to not just focus on this conflict, but see it within the broader aspect of things.
Yeah.
So
by the way, you can also, since it is security, you can also make mention of our own nationally here, because there are too many shootings going on, and it's not a good thing.
Okay, yeah, the others will do that.
Yesterday, there was a lawyer who was shot and killed from his home.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Last night?
Last night.
In Makinde.
At, I think, in Makinde at around 11 p.m. From the report that we are seeing. And it's quite scary and not a good thing.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I was going to say there are, for me, I think there are around 3 or 4 lessons we have to take from this, and those in charge of the country plan better. One, we are talking about Al-Shabaab as an Islamic force, but we also need to be aware, alive to the fact that extremism comes in different forms.
Yeah.
So while the extremism around the continent has been in form of religious forces, if you talked about extremism like in Colombia around the FARC, that is a totally different thing driven by drugs. Then the IRA were driven by other things. Of course, they were also Catholic, but it was not the Catholic ideology driving them. So we need to pay attention to forces of extremism rising. We talked about the unfortunate bit of scaling down forces when actually we think the peacekeeping forces are beginning to gain ground. But I think for our people who are there is to know that maybe the West, this is not the first time the West behaves like that. If you look at the history of Somalia right from the 60s and Ethiopia, it has always been the US and Russia scaling up and reducing, playing those two against each other. So we have to guard against that so that we are not played. So if they think one is having an upper hand in Ethiopia, the other one gets an upper hand in Somalia, and then they exchange positions, and when they realize there's no threat from each of them, they abandon both of them, and then they fight each other, and then we have these kinds of things. Then, so we have to be very careful about the foreign interests. The other thing is to know that nation building is a very big project, and sometimes a very long-term project. And that's where we need to pay attention to what are the internal contradictions of these societies and see what works for them, because the one-size-fits-all as designed by the UN may not be the way to go. It might be, maybe in this particular case, nurturing the different warlords and finding a way of forming the state. But most importantly, as we do that, we also need to find out what works in Somaliland, which we can bring down. And lastly, how do we carry on the issue of development? Because I know if a society is stuck in poverty, and from one economic and environmental and social crisis to another, there will always be these kinds of forces. So we cannot underestimate the role of development, and that's why we thank the UPDF for the construction they are doing there, and any other group that is doing that, but also to know that we always have to prioritize development. And you know, we've not had time to go into the impacts of this on the people, education, health, and everything, but we can read that for ourselves. For our forces, lastly, is to say we are really sorry. For me, the thing which captured me most was seeing this lady in UPDF uniform with her head bowed. Of course, the newspaper said she was grieving for friends who are lost. So there are real lives here, there are real relationships that have been shattered, but we thank them that they still soldier on. I mean, for us, we wouldn't be soldiering on, but they still soldier on, and we shall continue praying for them. Thank you
very much. Honorable Mlongo.
Thank you so much. I think, first and foremost, I want to dispel the narrative that we are only playing the tune from the West, as if we cannot identify and define our own problems. There could be convergence of ideas, but we identified the problem of Somalia as Africans and East Africans, particularly. And that definition goes down into the intelligence that we gathered, and having been able to define the propensity of the violence this would scale if we do not contain it. Yes, there could have been some convergence of interest with the greater strategy of counterterrorism by the Americans, but it is ours. Why I say this, because the role of Americans in this war is different from ours. For them, they're going after some selected targets. Even if they find 100 Al-Shabaab seated there, they look for Mulongo, whom they're looking for because he killed one of their soldiers in 95. Or that he trained in Afghanistan and caused a problem to them. For us, we're not doing that. Ours is totally different. And when you ask them for equipment to help you, they only limit you. The ISR they have has limitations. So surely our problems here are defined by ourselves, and we're pursuing them as such. Secondly, ideology is one of the key pillars of national interests. And people have gone to war over difference in ideology. So if it is Islam and has elements that are disagreeable to the Western notions as we know it, and which notions have no standard cast in stone variables. Democracy is defined and built on by realities of a given country. So we don't have one size fits all of the Western democracy. So in that regard, yes, we can't say because Islam is a religious thing and so is Christianity to the West. No, no, no. The things that go into each of these are a lot. The intolerance by the Islamic fundamentalists is too much. There are no freedom. They cannot accommodate anyone else, and so on.
But even this some of the financiers.
Yes.
They are also intolerant.
They're also intolerant, but I'm saying that defines ideological orientation and why you can even go to war.
You know, someone here from Tororo is saying that can't we exploit the idea of peace talks alongside military interactions? And then he says, can't Islamists be listened to and talked out of their ideology if we disagree with them? Then he says, I know imposing ideology and policies on others is the cause of what you see in Somalia. For example, telling Uganda to accept homosexuality.
You can see we could go to war over that.
Yes,
we can go to war over that.
Yes.
Because we think it is at the core of our values.
Yes,
and
because the Africans, Ugandans are saying that this is at the core of our, it's against our values, whatever the values may be. They believe that. Then they say, you are attacking our families, you are attacking our future, and then when the MPs make the law, you also don't want them to make it.
Yeah.
That could cause a problem.
Yes, it can. So, so in this regard, the issue of ideology is very critical. As long as it is in line with our national interests, that we believe that if they're attacked, then it's an attack on us. And for that matter, the question, we're not just trying to impose Western values onto Somalis. We're trying to provide space for all to survive in an environment that allows those fundamentalists to exist as much as Christians. Do you know that there are many Christians in Somalia, but they've been subdued? If you profess Christianity, it's a death penalty. And so we cannot accept this. We want where there can be coexistence and so on and so forth. And for talking, yes, we're engaging them. We do engage them in talks. I did mention about that. And some people like Sheikh Sharif came out. People like Mukhtar Robo, who was number 2, came out. And a number of other fighters have come out. But there are those who are totally inclined to one side. And those are the ones we want to create a condition for them to come to table. We're not just there to annihilate the Al-Shabaab, but we're there to provide a condition for them to accept to talk. The other thing is the limitations in the mission have been caused, as I said, by more outside factors. Things like those who want the war to continue. And that's why I want to say this clearly. I don't agree with the notion of replacing AMSOM with Artemis, when actually the same thing, totally the same thing. This was an attempt to bury the good history of AMSOM. Because AMISOM managed to reverse a situation where very mighty people failed. And as some members mentioned here, you know the catastrophic end to the attempted mission, both UN and Americans, in Somalia. But we managed to make that history. They want to bury it. So by creating this transition thing, and instead of it becoming a strategy, they call it a mission. Using the same people, same structure, same everything. And I don't think that is correct. I wish we could have fought it. But anyway, that's what it is now. And lastly, I think the way forward for Somalia is to continue with multi-pronged approach. Dialogue and the military. And then behind all this, we must have emphasis to capacity building to state institutions.
Okay.
Why, as Andrew was saying, some people left, was that there was no holding capacity to what we trained. Uganda trained about 5,000 between 2007 and 2016. But they all melted into the areas where they would be paid better. And that includes Al-Shabaab, who get 10,000 more than collection of taxes than the government. Okay. So they have higher capacity to pay. So we need to train and be able to retain these soldiers, facilitate them, and remember, a trained soldier, if you get General Klaija here, he has been at war for the last 25 years. Now you want them to train for only 2 years and think they're now soldiers to man the national security apparatus. They will not. Okay. And that's why the issue of the exit, which we already well planned, can only be implemented upon conditions. And it's not about endless time. No, we have made achievements which can be ticked off. Degrading Al-Shabaab, how much have we done? It's not about just geographical area holding, you know, it's about capacity, decapacitating the Al-Shabaab from waging successfully war against the government.
Okay.
So Andrew, I think with that we could do, and then of course, last of all, ningependa kutoa rambirambi kwa ajili ya wanajeshi wetu waliopoteza maisha katika kule Somalia na jamii zao. This is something that we really mourn, and we think the lessons we pick from this, because this is one of the very rare circumstances where we lost. Yeah. And there are reasons for it which we must pick and ensure that nothing like that happens again. Okay. Thank you very much.
You jacked Andrew when you went to Kiswahili. He turned and looked at you.
Andrew first wondered what language was going on.
Okay, I speak Swahili better than anybody else.
Andrew?
I think I have made all the points that I need to make. I should let Kulaije make his concluding remarks.
Thank you.
Okay. Tim?
I think for me it's a question you asked lastly about sustainability. And it was something about funding that for me is something that is questionable. General agrees that now, even when they got in the first incidents, it took 14 days for the equipment to be able to come in 2007. Now that it's cutting back on funding, the question is, where is the funding going to be to sustain this war or to sustain this peacekeeping or peace mission, whatever they're calling it right now? I also look at the dependency syndrome that the Somalis, as Andrew asked, if the army left, if the AU left, can this Somali force be able to sustain the peace, even the relative peace that the UPDF has brought into there? Honorable Mlongo talked about ideology, and we need to find a middle ground, especially for the Somalis. We say African problems, African solutions. How about Somali problems, Somali solutions? The people there, do they have ideas on what they want to do to sustain their country? Because it will become a question of survival or existential as a threat in that country. So moving forward, I think diplomacy should be at the forefront. And hearing Honorable Mlongo and General Klaije, it seems there is a difference between what the UN mission is and what the forces that are there for part of the AU, what their mission is. They're keeping peace, they don't seem to be on a career going somewhere. So it's evolving as Al-Shabaab. It has young people there. It has different ideologies. Even as we engage, can we be able to understand what exactly is happening there? But the funding is the biggest thing I'd like to hear from the General going forward. Shall we be touching the pockets of Ugandans?
Can we afford? General, finally.
I want to start with the feedback. Good evening, Afande. Today, you people have given our national broadcaster the best brand. The panel in the studio is a complete pack of intellectuals. For the first time in media history, Andrew Mwenda has got a team to drill a gentleman discussant out of him. Charles is a wonderful moderator. That's a feedback.
Thank you. But if you want another feedback, there are two that I thought, they said I must read this. One is for Andrew. Listen to this. Ivan from Munyonyo, he says, Charles, thanks for this show. I do not get sleep when the show has not yet ended. This goes to the old man of the clan. I have a lot of people asking me to join the MK movement. Kindly contact me, Andrew, to help them support their general. he has even left his what? His number. Then another one says, thanks, Charles. You have the best brain. These guys and yourself for Uganda, you people love this country. Uganda is on the right track. You people, God bless you all.
Amen.
And God bless Uganda.
Amen.
So, General, your last message. Way forward. And
first of all,
message.
Tim was asking whether Uganda will be able to sustain the mission financially. When we went to Parliament for authorization of the deployment, one of the conditions was it must be budget neutral. That was one of the first conditions. Meaning, no Ugandan shilling should be spent on that mission. And we have religiously followed that. But two, again, back to what I started with. When you put money first, forget about your objectives. When we deployed in 2007, no single coin was being paid to the soldiers. The aerial battle group 1, Ugabag 1 as we are calling it, did not have allowances paid. They were sweeping human excreta to drink water.
Oh.
Actually, even Ugabag 2, under the command now of General Goloba, same thing. So, for me, anybody who is downplaying the role of Uganda as a country, in my view, they are really burying the legacy of two generals, the late Reverend Karuhanga and Nathan Mugisha, who is the deputy ambassador now, who actually was buried in rubble of a bomb that had exploded at the force headquarters.
That killed the deputy.
And they killed his deputy, the Murundi general. These are guys that, in my view, should be on a wall of fame. Plus, of course, the men and the women they were commanding. If they had said, since there is no money, we are not going, this mission would not have started off. So the question of sustainability, for me, lies in the ideology. And this young man who was talking about the best pan was saying that ideology, ideology should be Pan-Africanism should be the ideology that governs all the engagements on this question. What do you want to achieve as a continent? Are African countries willing indeed to spend their resources? That's another question. Because this business of waiting for outsiders to solve our problems makes us beggars to them. And yet when they come, they are coming with their own objectives. I can assure you, there's a particular country that has all the Somali maps. All. What is in underground, what is above the ground, they have them. Why? And why shouldn't that be a reason for us to fold our sleeves and say, we must get that to achieve peace and stability on the continent?
Thank you very much. Thank you, General. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much, old man. Thanks, Honorable Mulongo. And thank you, Professor. Thanks to all, and from the technical team here, from all here.
Before you close,
yeah,
I just want to inform our listeners, this is the last day that Charles is going to be hosting this show.
Wow.
Oh. And I want to thank you, Charles, for, first of all, beginning this show, and making it such a powerful presence in our national political life and debate. You have dedicated a lot of your time and intellect to it. And I am also glad to see that my grandson, your cousin, since you're also my grandson, your cousin, Timothy Nyangweso, is the one that is going to replace you, and I want to welcome Timothy to be a host of this show. I hope you live up to the high standards that Charles has set to ensure that you always have a panel of the best intellectuals and ask the right questions and get the debate in the right direction.
Timothy has hosted me before.
Ah.
So he's
supposed
I
to
have no doubt
okay.
in his capacity.
Thank you very much, and God
Now,
bless you all.
no, before you close, on the show, there is a gift that we want to give you for, I need to move with my,
Yes. Put it in the pocket or something.
Let me first get my
gadget.
My
hook it on the trouser or
now
It's long enough.
It's long enough.
Yes, look at it.
So I have to give you this great gift. Should we open it or we keep it?
We keep open it.
Eh? Okay. We're going to.
This is the first time another person is opening a gift of another person. If it is a gift.
And can you suggest we all come?
Yes, guys, all of you come. We want to. Okay, let's give it to him. He will open it himself.
And
Please.
Go ahead. Since you have a panel. Go ahead and.
So we want to give you a gift to thank you for your tireless service. Yeah.
Yes.
So Charles, you can come here. I will hand it to you personally because I am the grandfather of the show.
The young grandfather.
You guys, you have done it in the spirit of UPDF.
Wow.
Charles.
Wow. With General Kulaije, General Muhozi, David, with the late General Eli Tumwine.
Yes.
Wow.
And of course you have Colonel General.
Colonel General is
you can see here when he was a sheikh. You forgot at that time to ask me to give you an oil well. Then we have Gobi, my grandson Ramadan Gobi. We have General Mood. So you really have been in the company of generals all the time.
Yes.
Wow, beautiful.
And Honorable Katuntu.
Yes.
And
that's my other grandson from Busoga.
Sarah Birete.
Yes. The
and
greatest
Honorable
activist.
Semojo.
There.
Honorable Mao. Honorable Babu.
It's a complete album.
This is a summary of the history.
You can go and put it in your living room, and when the thieves enter, ensure that you stop them from the compound because.
No, they should take everything except this one.
Yes.
Including my life.
Guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks a lot. No, you have been one of my best. You, Andrew, Professor, and you have been some of the best to feature here. Thank you very much. And,
so, do you take the last picture with you?
Oh, yes, we are going to.
Yes.
We are going to take a picture. Bye.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Ladies and gentlemen, this June 2023, we celebrate 33 years of a legendary school music doctor and professor, Sir Paul Saka, live at Kampala Serena Hotel, Victoria Hall, in a live music concert, dubbed 33 years of Paul Saka and school music in Uganda. All happening on 11th of June 2023 with Rama Namakula, Pastor Wilson Bugel.